Back in the days of the Taliban, Afghanistan's media landscape was barren. Television sets were banned, radio stations were not allowed to play music, and newspapers were forbidden from printing pictures. But since 2001, the country's media sector has been revolutionized. Today, there are more than 400 news outlets there. The explosive growth in media has been largely bankrolled by the West, primarily the U.S. But with Western troops preparing to leave in 2014, international funding for the media will soon be drying up. Can Afghanistan's fledgling economy support its vast new media sector? Or will a Western-backed media that is among the most vibrant in the region dwindle, giving way to what critics call warlord TV, the partisan playthings of Afghanistan's political and religious parties? The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on the future of Afghanistan's media.
Overseas now to Afghanistan, and a stark reminder tonight of the human cost of war.
We want to update you on a breaking story that we're bringing to you out of Afghanistan.
Over a decade of war, the news from Afghanistan has been unrelentingly grim. However, one of the few success stories to come out of the country has been the news business itself. There's been a revolution in Afghanistan's media sector in the past 10 years, and it hasn't happened by accident.
Western governments and institutions realized early on that media could play a significant role in terms of facilitating social change in this country, and also to open up the world to Afghans. And media informs, it entertains, to a large extent allows people to let off steam. People can hold institutions and individuals accountable. It plays the role of many things in a country like this. You know, Western governments may have made a lot of mistakes. Helping the media has been, I think, one of the big success stories.
After the Taliban were gone, Afghanistan went through a difficult period. At the Bonn conference in December 2001, an international agreement was signed mandating that the people of Afghanistan must be helped. Support for media outlets was also included. If the international community had not extended financial assistance, then we would have never had the type of media we have today.
NAJIBA AYUBI does what was unthinkable under the Taliban. She's a woman heading a media network. It's called the KILLID group. It consists of 3 magazines and 8 radio stations, supported by money from the US and the European Union. When a US-led coalition drove the Taliban out of power in 2001, there were no television channels in Afghanistan, just 1 radio station and a handful of newspapers, all of them under government control. A little more than a decade later, there are nearly 80 television stations, 300+ newspapers, and another 170 radio outlets.
Donors' role is quite significant in setting up the media sector in Afghanistan. I think one has to pay tribute to their role in setting up such a vibrant, strong media sector in Afghanistan from almost nothing. But there is quite a lot of donor dependency as a result of donor funding in the media market.
USAID is the American government's primary agency for administering civilian foreign aid. According to research carried out by the Center for International Media Assistance, between 2002 and 2011, the agency spent $65 million on Afghanistan's media industry. Hundreds of millions of dollars more were spent by the State Department and the Pentagon. In 2010, the US Embassy in Kabul was allocated another $183 million to spend on new media projects that would, quote, expand media engagement, build communication capacity of the Afghan people and government, and counter extremist voices that recruit, mislead, and exploit, unquote.
All of this begs the question, is international funding for a free press in Afghanistan reserved for those who take their editorial orders from the West?
As someone who has been working in this field in Afghanistan for the past 10 or 11 years, I never sensed from the donors anything that would indicate their influence or their sway in editorial. I did not sense this. If I were to ever do so, then I would never accept funds from that donor.
From where we stand, there have been no demands made as far as our editorial lines are concerned. And to be honest with you, that's something that would be crossing the red line. We wouldn't certainly accept that. But we do share similar aspirations. Our policies, to a large extent, reflect what the US and others would like to see in Afghanistan. So on those issues, we're on the same wavelength.
Some media outlets received the majority of Western help, while other outlets did not receive any form of assistance. Aid should be given according to the specific policy of each channel. When we at AYNA TV broadcast about freedom of speech and talk about democracy, the rights of the people, these are things that are accepted in international and Western society. When we talk about things that are accepted in the West here, we must be helped.
FARIDON ILHAM is the CEO of AYNA TV, a channel owned by General Dostum, once a notorious warlord who is now a political leader. It's one of a number of warlord TV stations that are run by powerful political and ethnic leaders and used to promote personal agendas. As one Afghan journalist told Foreign Policy magazine, you can't be a self-respecting warlord these days and not have your own television station.
There are certain strongmen who, buy a television station or set one up from scratch. A, maybe because it's a sort of a vanity project, they feel good that they have a television station. B, to defend themselves. They believe that if they ever come under attack from a government institution, from the Attorney General's office, that they could actually defend themselves using this television station.
In Afghanistan, there is poverty and illiteracy. The benefit of having a TV station for political parties and leaders is to put across the aims and policies of their parties to their people through broadcast media.
The stations collectively have about 2% of the market share in the country. So in terms of following and in terms of audience shares, it's not really big, but they do have the ability to incite. So if you remember the burning of the Quran by Terry Jones, the cleric in the US, that was repeatedly broadcast on one of the TV channels in Afghanistan, and it did lead to some violent demonstrations and violent protests.
Opinion is divided over warlord TV. While many are glad to see battles between warlords relegated to the airwaves, others fear that these channels heighten ethnic and religious tensions in the country. And as the clock ticks down to the planned NATO military pullout and Western media funding subsides, the new independent media outlets could be overtaken by these more partisan players. The future for some of the smaller Western-backed outlets is looking bleak.
Some of these television and radio stations cannot sustain themselves. They shouldn't be able to sustain themselves because they're not managed well enough. They don't try to go and get advertising money. They don't have content that really appeals to people. People don't watch them. So you will see a consolidation. You will see a lot of outlets go to the wall, go bankrupt.
The advertising revenue is very small. The advertising market cannot fund the number of media outlets that have sprung up over the past 10, 11 years. The only other alternative would probably be funding from sources that would want to co-opt media organizations, that would want to manipulate them.
As international troops begin withdrawing from Afghanistan, the ramifications are already being felt in politics, security, and the media. The numerous channels, the newly trained young journalists, the opportunities for free speech are all vulnerable. NATO's war here may be ending soon, but the struggle for domination of Afghanistan's media space has only just begun.
More Global Village voices now on the future of the media in Afghanistan.
The independent media in Afghanistan will not survive without financial support from the international community. The only media that survives post-2014 will be the media that belong to the warlords, power brokers, and sub-government entities, which will not be able to support the democracy, to support the people's voices, and to support the social societies in the country.
Television stations, of course, are increasingly important, but we have to remember that they still are relatively inaccessible for a lot of the population. Newspapers can do some very high-quality journalism. There's been investigations, for example, recently by the newspaper 8 AM into issues like land grabs, which have been really in-depth pieces of work, which have done investigations that other parts of the media don't seem to have been able to do.